Yep, we're on.
Yep. I think you did. You hear that? What I said there?
No, you know what? I'm still learning this software, and I had you muted, so we'll just back up and start off with. I bet you're a little warmer than 4 degrees.
Oh yeah. So, and thank you for having me. Yes, it's only about 52, 58 degrees here tonight. So we're doing
fine. Oh, that's
fine.
wonderful. Well, Brother Gil, listen, I'm just gonna. Hopefully, this can just set the table well for us tonight. We'll do the best we can. Can we launch out into Planet X tonight? And I know this is a broad brush, but can you just tell us everything you know about Planet X? Just start from wherever you'd like to launch. Bring us up to speed with your personal issues you may have had with it at the beginning, and then how you begin to understand it on a different level, and how that opened up different avenues of research, and where are you at now? And if you want to, just take us through the whole thing, clear up to the end when you think we're going to see this mystery heavenly body that's called Planet X.
All right. At the beginning, when I started this search, I was actually going to try to find scientific reasoning why such a planet could not exist. Because the question had come up to me that is Planet X real, and is it biblical? And so my first off-the-cuff answer that I would give would be that it was not real. And then I'm pretty sure if we looked in the Bible that we could find something that would prove otherwise, that it couldn't exist. So after that conversation, I decided to do a search. I was quite aware of some of the stuff that was on the internet, and it they didn't back it up with actual hard evidence. Okay, they have stories of claims of the past, but to bring something from the myth realm into the factual realm is what we need as data. And data was lacking throughout the stories that I've heard repeated. And what I'm about to tell you tonight is I'm going to kind of break the usual model of what you hear talked about Planet X. My research pointed out was that we had a bunch of circular reasoning going on, because one person had stated it was carried on to almost all of the conversation. And then that's how we ended up getting this 3,600-year orbit. Anytime you go back further than 1,000 years or so, zeros were not present. They were implied in the text. So we need data that was possibly even earlier to better determine if you're only going to read text without actual data that gives you multiple comments on where it was seen, time and date and location, country, even elevation or level of brightness, all of the criteria we need to plot a segment of its orbit to see if it follows planetary physics or Kepler's laws of motion. And that type of data was greatly lacking in anything that you'd read today pertaining to this Planet X. So what I came across was my own findings that actually convinced me that Planet X is a real object. And I renamed it so I could separate the data to where I called it Planet 7X, because there's enough data that we could roughly estimate the size between 6.5 and 7.5 diameters of Earth. And so I named it 7. That the data in the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese records of just less than I think it was around 960 years ago in year 1054, it was documented that he saw an object. And the data I found it in a white paper report. It's a scientific paper. And there's multiple authors giving the same accounts of this paper, that the object viewed in 1054, which is normally claimed to be a supernova, is not a supernova. This object, when they went back and reviewed the Chinese text, says that it was moving from constellation to constellation, and that they surmised that the supernova was several months earlier, and that this object was a new unidentified object, what I would classify as a NEO, a near-Earth object. Well, the data that they put forth in this paper was, I would say, so detailed that we can bring the information into the laboratory, make a model, put it in the software, put our place and time according to what they had said, and see if it follows Kepler's laws of planetary motion and the laws that govern the universe that follows the software model. And when we did that, we came out with a startling find, that the object that was viewed in 1054 was on Earth's planetary plane, and that it crosses Earth's path twice. It enters around the position of August 29th. It circles the sun, and it exits in the month of March, otherwise known as the month of Passover. And it has roughly about 150-day separation between the entry and the exit. Well, those points match biblical records of Noah's flood, the incidents that happened in Noah's flood, 150 days apart between the time the rain started, which is the collapsing of the canopy of water, which I believe the canopy was collapsed by a meteor shower, and 150 days where the earth stayed flooded for that whole period. And at 150 days, Noah makes the claim that the water started to recede and that there was a great wind that came over. That great wind is from the impact blast of a much bigger comet that made the Gulf of Mexico, that knocked off about 71% of Earth's crust, for the water to recede into the void, and that crust ended up coalescing into our moon. Our moon is the exact volume of the missing crust that we have on Earth. And at that same time, the Himalayas were raised, and that's why we have the Himalayas in an arc shape, a semicircle shape, because the pressure wave that bounces off the core and comes back up will have that imprint of a circular shape, and that's why it was lifted up in seconds. It didn't take thousands of years. It was lifted up in seconds. And we have a practical model that can prove this out. And we can walk through the Bible. I think I was able to list about 19 incidents that correlate to our model in the Bible, 18 to 19 different times that it's come by in the past. And all of these models, plus the two reports pertaining to the Chinese event in 1054, plus two scientific papers that talk about the orbits of comets being warped by unknown gravity in our universe, as well as the actual contact, I call it instrument contact, of Pioneer and Voyager probes from NASA. The biblical references of 19 and all of these 6 incidences, all point to the same area of space, which is Sagittarius, on the ecliptic. And there's 88 constellations. For all these independent studies to point to the same single constellation on the ecliptic out of 88 is quite shocking. So we have hard data now that's pointing to a real object in a real area of space that most of the data that's on the internet is pointing you away from. It's misleading, if anything. And to look at this in another way, we can pull 2 or 3 other examples, like Joshua's long day. It says that he had 12 extra hours of daylight during the battle. Well, I built a model and I showed it to a physics professor, and he took time to study the model, and he came back that I was the first one to explain this logically, because I was able to show the magnetosphere as the magnetosphere points opposite of the sun, and picture its path going, in front of Earth by maybe a 2-hour lead. 4 to 28 hours earlier, if you back up the path of where it was, Earth is entering into the magnetosphere, which is actually plasma, coming off the tail of this object. And as it goes further and further, it gets deeper and deeper into the plasma. And this ends up reducing the energy from the sun that goes into our north and south pole of 4.5 to 5.5%, compounded hourly, the loss is. So what you have is, after about 24 to 28 hours later, you have the Earth coming to a complete stop without mile-high tidal waves. And another point of Joshua's long day that we can prove out is that in the Talmud gives us historical references pertaining to this battle, that there was a fiery hail fell from heaven 2 to 3 hours later, killing only the enemy within the sight of Joshua and his 30,000 men. The math actually works out as far as how long would it take before a meteor shower would start and how long would it last, according to other references in the Bible. And again, that was quite a shock to see a model. Remember, when we can take a phenomena of this type, bring it into the laboratory and show a model, and that shows that these events are repeatable in a model, and shows that it didn't violate any of the known laws we have in our universe, and it proves it out. That it's very difficult for people of that time period who had no concept of Kepler's law of planetary motion, or how the planets even orbited the sun, to make up a incidence that matches our planetary physics. And another good case to take a look at is when Yeshua was sacrificed, there was a 3-hour eclipse. Well, there's a problem there, because on Passover you have a full moon, and you can only have a solar eclipse on a new moon position. And the text says it was for 3 hours. Well, the moon can only give you 7.3 minutes of darkness. And it's only on a small part of Earth, not the entire world, as the text is implying, that the whole world went dark. Even in the Bible as well as outside the Bible, there's references that the whole world was darkened. Well, this is actually defining that there was a third object there. And according to the model, if we take an object 7 times the Earth's diameter at a given distance, it gives you 3 hours of total darkness throughout the whole Earth. We have a physical model that we can turn to that mirrors the exact accounts on what they saw. And these are the pivotal points that I'm saying that brings us out of false claims and circle reasoning, and brings us into data and facts and models that shows that what they saw does not violate planetary physics, and it follows Kepler's laws of planetary motion, and that it matches a real event that was seen in China in 1054. We're using the same overlay, the same entry and exit, and all of the parameters of what the Chinese had saw. We're using that overlay on all of these biblical models. And this also matches Revelation, seal 6 and 7. According to the model, seal 6 describes what we can expect in the month of Passover when the object is leaving. And seal 7 is when we run into the debris field 150 days later, towards the end of August. And the scariest part about this is the biblical text says that this is the worst time in Earth's history. Well, knowing Noah's flood and other incidents, this next time is the worst for Earth, then that's very severe.
And Brother Gil, you're not suggesting that it's going to be this year, like this Passover. You're just saying it will be Passover.
No.
Right.
In 2016. There's a date given in Revelation 12:1.
Now, see, I've heard you say about that date. That's something interesting to me, and we might get into that later. I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say about that, because I know that Revelation 12, we're talking about the sun-clad woman, and you're talking about the 12 stars that are at the crown. You're talking about the moon at her feet, and you're talking about she's being clothed in the sun. Now, when you get down into some of these deeper parts of Revelation, the interpretations can be various. I mean, I've heard so many people say so many different things. You think 2016 is definitely the year, or do you think it's a possibility? Do you think, I remember when we were on the phone, I thought you said to me that until it shows up, this is all just a theory or something to that effect. Are you now thinking that it's absolutely going to be 2016?
I'll put it like this. It greatly concerns me.
Okay.
The reason why is I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot tell you the future. But I can tell you mathematically and astronomically wise, it's impossible for them to pull a date out of thin air 2,000 years ago and have it exactly fall 3.5 days after the Feast of Passover, where Elijah is supposed to announce the groom is coming. You see, 3.5 days prior to this is a full moon on the date given in Revelation 12:1.
Could I just take a minute and read Revelation 12:1, and then we'll talk about it?
Sure.
Okay, let's look at Revelation 12:1. Then I want to get back into the sixth seal. And I do want to say this, Brother Gil. I believe that the sixth seal could be a pole shift. I try not to be dogmatic. I mean, I understand when you get into Bible prophecy, you got the pre-tribbers, the mid-tribbers, the post-tribbers. I'm kind of like a hybrid pan-mid-trib. That's like a lot of words because I've heard so many great men of God disagree on these things. And I know I don't have it all figured out, but I love to talk about it. I love Bible prophecy. And it's not because I'm a doomsdayer, but it excites me to think that Jesus is coming back again. I mean, since I've been a child, this is all I've ever really known. I got saved when I was like 6 years old at my grandpa's church, and the Lord miraculously put our family back together not long after that. Growing up, I was raised in the Assemblies of God Church, a great denomination, and I've always thought about Jesus coming back. It's always been something that has been on my mind. Even when I'd be riding my bike as a kid, I'd look up at the sky and I would think about it. I'd ride my four-wheeler, in my teen years, driving out through the mountains thinking Jesus is coming back one day. And I guess one of the reasons, because I'm into Bible prophecy probably more than the average person. I'd say probably much more. And sometimes, my wife, who's a great balance for me, she balances me out because I would talk about it all the time because it excites me. It detonates a fire in me or something because I know that Jesus is coming back and we're going to get to meet him. We're going to be with him. And I'll tell you, when he comes back, when you read about his return, he's going to establish his kingdom, but he's coming back with a fire in his eyes and a sword in his hand. And there's definitely a battle that's going to happen, and he's the victor. But without getting into all that, maybe we can a little bit later. The sun-clad woman in Revelation 12. Now, before we get started, I totally believe that it is talking about a constellation. In my studies of the book of Job and some of the Old Testament passages of Scripture, I have learned that God, he's not discreet about the Mazzaroth. The Mazzaroth are the 12 signs of the zodiac. And I hope that everyone listening understands that we are not into astrology. Astrology is, in my opinion, of the devil. Astrology is when you look at the newspaper, you look at the horoscopes, you look at the stars for your answers in a way that's apart from your faith and your trust in Jesus Christ. Because the Bible says specifically in Genesis chapter 1, I think it's verse 14, that God put the lights in the sky for signs. So God designed the stars to be for signs. And I've heard it said, and I concur, that we can read the Bible if we only knew how to interpret the stars in the sky. In other words, God wrote the Scripture, God wrote the Gospel, God wrote the story in the stars, but we just can't interpret. And I believe that the planets, which are moving three different ways, we are rotating, we are moving around the sun, revolving, and we are also moving through our galaxy. So there's a tri-movement there. And I believe that as all the planets are on their orbital paths, it's like a cosmic clock. And God knows when Earth will turn for its last time, because I believe there will be a last time. I used to subscribe to the theory that Earth would go on forever. But I know that there's scriptures in the Bible that say heaven and earth will pass away. I think now, more than ever, that the new Earth is actually a new planet, that this Earth will probably completely be destroyed. I know there's scriptures that people go back and forth, and that's why I don't like to argue with people. I know there's people who try to argue different things with me. I'm really not a confrontational person, which if you hear me preach, you wouldn't think that. I preach, and there's a boldness there when I'm working and functioning in that gift that thank God by His grace He's given me, and anything good I can do, I give glory to God, and I want that to be my true heart always. But when I'm just one-on-one, sometimes I might be the quietest one around the campfire, But I think as we get going forward here, I don't want to get too far off on a rabbit trail. I really don't. As we get going forward here with the sun-clad woman, I'm going to just rein it back in. I want to read out of Revelation chapter 12, and then let's talk about this, because I do believe it's a constellation, back to my original point. And we're not getting into astrology here, But again, Genesis chapter 1, the lights are in the sky for signs, for seasons. I think it says even for days and years. They're markers. They're how God communicates certain message with humanity. I do believe that these 4 blood moons, I believe that they are significant. I'm not predicting anything. I'm not predicting any year or any date or any time. But I do know this, Brother Gil, there are a lot of strong, sound men of God that are looking to this fall. One of them is very close to me that's saying, listen, he's not setting a time or date, but he's saying, I'd be prayed up this September. I would be prayed up. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I would be ready this September. And I know, Brother Gil, you're looking perhaps at 2016 with high anticipation, but I've never seen a season like this. I can't remember one. 2012, there was a lot of people talking about that Mayan calendar and things like that, but they misinterpreted that, and thankfully people like Tom Horn came out right on top of that before it ever happened, said, listen, the Mayans aren't saying anything besides that. The Mayans were a cult. The Mayans were, they would have been driven by devils, but we do know that the devil has a panoramic view of time, a little different than humanity. Of course, by the Holy Spirit's help, we can know all things, but the devil is kind of like his understanding of time and space is different than just humanity. But again, with the Spirit of God's help, we can supersede anything and understand things that we need to understand at any given time. Okay, I'm talking way too much. I'm trying not to. But we're not getting into astrology now. But I believe that Revelation 12:1 is definitely talking about a constellation event in the heavens. That's maybe a new term. I believe it's pointing us to the stars and letting us know that there's going to be a specific time in heaven where the stars align in a certain way. And I'll read 12:1, Brother Gil, and then if you want to talk about it, maybe we'll bounce some things off each other for the next couple minutes. Does that sound okay to you?
That's fine.
Okay. Revelation 12:1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. Now think about it. We got people in queue and listening online. Think about what we're reading. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Brother Gil, what's that mean?
Well, when I first read that, I was able to recognize this as his way of giving us a date, because they didn't have the Gregorian calendar. You know, we didn't have a calendar that he could give us that we could transfer to date. He gives a date using the stars. And in Hebrew, the word woman would have been actually maiden. That's where it's often assumed as a virgin, but it actually means maiden on the Mesorot, on the Hebrew version of the zodiac. Just like you were saying earlier, we're not supposed to use the stars or the zodiac pertaining to our day-to-day lives. And the zodiac uses the daytime skies, where the constellations are behind the sun. And you can only use charts or software to be able to read it. It's not viewed by everybody. Only a few people that wishes to use the software, the charts, for the purpose of the occult or using it as a zodiac. The biblical clearly gives us and defines, use it as a nighttime sky. If it's going to give you a sign in the heavens, it's going to be in the nighttime as far as a date. That way anybody can see it. So it says the great sign was seen in heaven. And the word sun there, since we don't have a let me see, the proper Hebrew word right there would have probably is a word that means illuminated body. And through deductive reasoning, sun does not make sense in the astronomy sense. And I can show you this, because if the sun is out, you can't see the stars. Okay, because there's only 5 illuminated bodies. There's the sun, the moon, the stars, comets, and planets that we see. So if the sun is out, you can't see the stars. The moon is already claimed at the foot of a woman. A star is not strong enough to cast its light on a constellation of stars. So you're only left with comet or planet. And this object I'm talking about tonight is both. It's as large as a planet, has a tail like a comet, and when we look at this in the nighttime skies, it's quite clear using the software. The tail of this object pierces only Virgo. As the text is implying, only Virgo is illuminated, not all the constellations. The sun would illuminate all the constellations. And this was quite shocking when we saw this in the model, using the same overlay as we had in all previous models. And Leo is normally drawn with 11 stars, but when the king planet is there, which is Jupiter, it is defined as the 12th star, which is the crown of 12 stars over the head of the woman. And that gives us a date of March 26, 2016.
So, Brother Gil, if I can just for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that Revelation 12:1, where it says a woman clothed with the sun, is essentially talking about Planet X being that you're saying that Virgo is going to be pierced by the tail of this Planet X.
Right, the comet-like tail.
That's how you're interpreting that. Okay. Well, I was listening on TV today to some people that were kind of in a roundtable discussion. I have DirecTV, and there are a myriad of Christian television shows on DirecTV. I mean, all sorts of new networks seem to be popping up all the time. I was listening to some very good men of God teaching around like a table. One specific man of God was teaching, and the other was kind of just talking in. There was some women there, and they were talking about the King James translation of the Bible. They got over and talking about that. There are some people that think, we should only read the King James and things like that. They don't understand that the King James, I believe, was the 13th or 14th translation down the line after the Geneva Bible was the household Bible for so long from the original. And when you get back into the original, sometimes when you compare it to the King James, you can see that to understand it for what it needs to be understood, you need to go back into the original. Do you agree with that, Brother Gil?
Without a doubt. It's only since the 80s that we've had software and computers for the general public. Now, any time since that time, there is software that gives you the actual Hebrew and a literal interpretation of each word.
Sure.
So we don't have to depend on translated copies per se, where we can go back and do our research from as close to the original document as we can. And my research kept pointing me back to the original documents, because there are translational errors, which I can point out in other instances that are there in the Englishes. Matter of fact, I was looking for a Bible that had the Aleph and the Tav. You've heard of the Alpha and the Omega. Okay? But remember, the New Testament wasn't even written yet when Yeshua said that in the synagogue. He says, that mystery that's in the Torah, I am the Aleph and the Tav. Okay? When you go back to the original Torah, it has over 6,000 places, Aleph and Tav. There's no English word for it, so it's left blank. So it doesn't show up in any of our English translations. But they could have easily put it in there in the text, Aleph and Tav, and allow you to know where it's at. It's missing 6,000 places in our Bible. And Yeshua said that was him.
You mean 6,000 places in the King James translation?
Just in the Old Testament alone. In the Aramaic, they have a different.
What you're saying is to find that you have to go back to the original manuscript.
That's right. Why is it there's like 2,500 English translated Bibles? When I walked into a Christian store, because I wanted something with the original names, to where I could look at it. And I was looking for something that pointed out the olive and top. Can't find it. I still don't have a translated version today that shows me in the English version is what I can get out of the Torah. And I'm looking for it still. And I've been through several Bibles. And that's a problem. We need to get back to the original. Because it has meaning.
Right. And you're talking about New and Old Testament. I'm so sorry. These blog talk radios, sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, it sounds like we're talking over each other. Brother Gil's calling in from, down in Louisiana, and I'm up here in Pennsylvania, and sometimes we get talking, and I think he's pausing, he's continuing on, but maybe because it's a delay or something, it seemed like I cut him off, so I apologize for being hard on the listeners' ears sometimes. I don't want to do that. But, Brother Gil, anything more you'd like to add to that piece right there?
Well, I mean, there's some people that's saying the September version, which is the daytime skies.
Oh, okay. I just meant the translation. So now we're going to get back into the sun-clad.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's go back into that sun-clad woman, and then we're coming up on the top of the hour, and we'll take a little break, and then when we kick back over, maybe I'll ask you one or two more questions, and we'll see where we go in the next hour. But now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in right now, this is blogtalkradio.com/interstellarrealities. We are Christians. We are born-again Christian believers, and we're talking about things that we believe are relevant to Bible prophecy. Of course, when you get into the study of eschatology, you branch out into all sorts of arenas that people have disagreement on, and when we bring guests on the show, they're expressing their heart, their theories, their interpretation of the Scriptures, and sometimes we agree on everything, and sometimes we might not agree on anything. I don't know, but it's fun to talk about. It gets the gears in the mind working, and we should be reading the book of Revelation right now. We should be studying Bible prophecy. I just know on a very, let's get back into the sun-clad woman. See, Brother Gil, once I start down there, I'll go on these rabbit trails. You got to help rein me in here, all right?
All right.
All right, let's go back into the sun-clad woman, and let's look. And It says in Revelation 12:1, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now, Brother Gil, we've already talked about that a little bit. Let's just go back into it now. We've definitely built the case that's talking about a constellation. Now, one more thing, we talked about the translations. The reason we got over into the translations is because you say that when the Bible says sun in that verse, it's talking about an illuminary. Let's just pick it up right there, and then let's finish off your thoughts about the verse and the date that you think this constellation alignment is going to take place.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, its tail, it's illuminated body, what it would have been in Hebrew, and then you have to use deductive reasoning to understand which one it is. So it leaves us with only two choices, comet or planet, and this object is both. And the tail of this object, according to the model, pierces only Virgo, as the text is specifically saying. The woman clothed with this object only, not Leo, not any of the other objects. So the light has to be like a beam, only shining on Virgo, and that's exactly what the model is showing. So it matches that detail, and I'm quite aware there's some people right now that are not aware of the full meaning when they're picking out the September, which is exactly 6 months later. That's why, to be able to see Virgo, you're looking at the daytime size.
Okay.
And that is the occult.
What you're referring to there is there's a video on YouTube right now, and it's really, really blowing up, I think. And there's a gentleman, I believe he's English, and he's talking about the sun-clad woman constellation taking place September the 17th, 2016 or 2017. And that's what. And you're saying that they're 6 months off, that this event's going to happen in the skies much earlier than that.
There's multiple videos trying to carry this, and through my findings, which I was not aware of this when I started this research, my knowledge of the Bible has expanded tremendously. The terms of Hebrew words, the customs of the Hebrew, you have to get in the mindset as well as know some of these words to be able to understand, like if a Greek person does not have Hebrew concept or he's not a Hebrew translating it to Greek, you will have mistranslations. Okay? Always. That's one of the problems of having someone translate documents who are not the original author. We have multiple videos out there representing September. Turn away from that. That is the occult. They're doing it without knowing it. Remember how the Bible says
clarify that.
people are doing wickedness?
You're not specifically saying that these individuals are into the occult. You're just saying that they don't even understand their own research and what it's linked to.
Exactly. It's no different. It's no different than a person grabbing a Ouija board, looking for their fortune, not knowing that they're doing the occult. They're doing it without knowing it.
I understand. So what you're saying is there's some ignorance involved with some of these reports.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Remember, remember how the Scripture says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge."
Sure.
Not lack of faith, not lack of religion, lack of knowledge.
Sure. Yeah.
Emphasize it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, Brother Gil, and we come under great criticism often about some of the things we research, some of the things that we talk about. I've tried just not to. I try not to take it personal because I know that sometimes our understandings are different. I try to be mindful of that, and sometimes I learn even from my biggest critics. I'll learn their vantage points, and I'll have to back up and say, maybe they have a point with this, or maybe they have a point with that, and maybe I could say things a little different or not come across as so. Sometimes when I preach, I get so passionate that I think I sound a lot more mad or something than I am. And if I'm mad at anything, I'm mad at the devil. If I'm mad at anyone, I'm mad at not the person or not the people, but I'm mad at what the enemy's doing. So sometimes even your critics can help you, even if they're wrong about some things. Maybe they'll get your mind working and you can think about others, and it'll bring a better rounded ideology in your heart. Yeah. And open you up to different things that you need to see. But I was gonna ask you one more thing, if I can. Did you have anything else to add? Well, let's go back to this date, Brother Gil. Let's go back to this date. So when you see Revelation 12:1, I'm in total agreement with the fact that it's a constellation, it's some alignment in the heavens, and you're saying that because it's the nighttime sky. It says a woman clothed with the sun. You wouldn't necessarily see. Well, you don't see the sun in the nighttime sky. So you're saying that this is alluding to Planet X and the tail-piercing Virgo, the Virgin. And you say that this constellation, of course, it also says the moon's going to be at her feet, and the 12 stars are not only talking about stars. If I'm remembering the things I've researched, it's talking about planets as well. Is that correct? The 12 stars there is also including planets.
Yeah, we can also verify this in multiple ways in the Scripture too. That we're talking about the month of March.
Okay.
Because think of this like a train on a track. The tracks are laid down and they don't change. The train may arrive at different times or late or early, but it doesn't jump track. That's the same thing with the orbit of an object. It's on a set path. This object right now, according to all of these models, we have, remember, verified data from the Chinese, Asian astronomers. This object comes in at the end of March, circles the sun, and exits in March. It comes in the end of August, circles the sun, and exits in March.
And you're drawing that conclusion from your data that you have researched from the Chinese and other records that you've pulled out from places that you've dug into around the world.
And the models
correct?
in the Bible. Yes.
Okay. Even better. But what you've done, Brother Gil, can you take a second before we go to our top of the hour break? Can you take a second and just let us know, I know you didn't go into all these countries specifically to research and things like that, but while you've been in these countries, because your job is taking you around the world, we don't have to get into all that, and you're what you would refer to as an amateur astronomer, but you have so much knowledge in this field. Can you just take a few minutes before we come to the bottom of the next hour and just talk about the research that you've done? How elaborate has it been? And in the next hour, maybe what we'll do is we'll walk through the scriptures, and you can talk about the places that you believe you found Planet X actually showing up in the Bible. Now, you're one of the many people that have went down that road. And again, we're going to have some guests here soon on our show that's going to talk more about it. Doug Elwell, author of Planet X and the Sign of the Coming of the Son of Man. Doug Elwell claims that the sign of the coming of the Son of Man is going to be Planet X. And he's a very fascinating speaker. And if you can tune in that night, I believe you'll be blessed. A great man of God. But Brother Gil, could you just take a few minutes? Let us, just before we start the next hour, we'll launch out into part 2 of this. We've talked about the sun-clad woman. Maybe we'll just put the finishing touches on that and why you believe that's coming in March, because you have the data to back that up through Scripture you just said. But let's just take a second as we're getting ready to go to our break and just talk a little bit about the research that you've done. I know that's switching gears a little bit. When we come back from the break, we'll finish up some of the loose ends with the sun-clad woman. Then maybe we'll walk down through the Word of God together and talk about Planet X in the Bible.
All right. So you want me to start from the beginning?
Yeah, just the research. We got here. Let's see. We've got about 7 minutes to break. Let's go 6 minutes, and then we'll take the break and come back.
Well, I've already touched on the information with the Chinese, which was a breakthrough. We actually have hard data, which is what formed the segment of its orbit. Now, that overlay mirrors the instances in Noah's flood. And then when we look beyond Noah's flood, we look at, let's see here, looking at the Tower of Babel for the next event. We have it's additional data that point that ancient text which is outside the Bible, referring to this incident, said that the top of the tower was burned, the base was sunken in the sand, which is, you can imagine as it being liquefaction. When the earth is shaken in sand and soil, it sinks. And you can go to Google Earth and go to where the old Babylon used to be, look a little bit south of that, where the first kingdom was, and you see a square in the sand where it looks like a moat around it, where it holds water now, where Zizzirat used to be. The Tower of Babel used to be there. It's destroyed, where it only has the middle section left, and you can see where it sank into the sand, exactly like these ancient texts are saying. And I believe the tower, the upper portion of the tower that was burned by meteor hits. And this was during the same time as Sodom and Gomorrah. They were just done in two different areas of different countries. Sodom and Gomorrah was near the southern part of the Dead Sea. And you can see how when they were walking to safety, one of the first towns were destroyed, and Lot's wife had looked back, and then the second town was destroyed. Well, if you have a air burst that's close to the ground, it has the capabilities to vaporize people and things. Well, how would a person of that period of time be to describe what was left? If if they would have seen her shadow on a wall or on a rock, the perfect outline of her, but she's vaporized, they would say that God turned it to a pillar of salt. Because if you look at the text, it's not God that says that he turned it to, it's man's description of what of the aftermath of that she was turned to a pillar of salt. We can see the same instances in Japan, where people were vaporized and their shadow was left on the wall, multiple places, still today. And this mirrors that particular incident. Then after that, you go about 223 years later, you have the Joseph of Egypt, the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. About midway of the famine, you get 3.5 years of famine coming in and 3.5 years of famine going out. About midway of its trip around the sun is where the 7-year drought happened. And through the Nibiru disk in Germany, it proves out that Earth actually tilted and is showing an eclipse of the sun with the moon to the right of it. The moon was not involved. And from the latitude of Germany, you cannot see the constellation of Monsieur Orion, which is shown on the disk in March. Because we can tell it's March because of the constellations that it's framed in. Earth had to tilt 26 to 28 degrees for the people of Germany to see the constellation of Monsieur Orion in March. This is the same time period, the exact time period. We can put a year and a date when this event happened in Egypt pertaining to Joseph. And that was in 1793 B.C. And remember his dream when he was 12 years old? Now, this happened when he's almost 40 or so years old. But when he was 12, he had a dream where the stars bowed to him, the sun and the moon and the 12 stars. Well, the Nibiru disk proves it that it literally bowed to him when he was in his 40s, whenever this thing passed.
Isn't that something?
The stars
because
actually bowed. Yes.
When this thing passed, you got the 7 years of famine. That's when all that took place, correct?
Exactly. Midway of the 7-year famine is when this thing is when the tilt to that Earth happened.
He had a dream when he was a boy that would happen. In that dream, you see the same terminology in Joseph's dream as you see in Revelation 12:1, don't you? The same kind of terminology, the sun, the moon, and the stars.
Oh, it's actually the exact comment from the viewpoint of Earth. Remember, the Earth is tilting, but what is the viewpoint of a person on it? It looks like the stars are bowing to him.
Isn't that something? Well, Brother Gil, if that's okay with you now, we'll take our top of the hour break. It's 11 o'clock here Eastern Standard Time. We're coming at you live from deep in the mountains of western Pennsylvania, and we're talking about Planet X and how it pertains to Bible prophecy. We're on with Brother Gil Broussard. We're going to take our top of the hour break. When we come back, we'll talk about whether or not Planet X is a comet or a planet. We'll talk a little bit about NASA, and we'll talk about Dr. Robert Harrington, perhaps. And if you don't know who that is, Google him, YouTube him. You will see one of the heads of the United States Naval Observatory. Now, listen, that's no Johnny-come-lately position. That's one of the heads of the United States Naval Observatory back in the late 70s, I believe it was. You can see the interview. He actually diagrammed and drew this whole Planet X scenario out. And he took technology down to Australia to try to find Planet X. This was a very high pedigree scientist with the United States Navy, and he got with Zachariah Stitchin, and maybe we'll get into some of the Stitchin's things, and I know Brother Gil Broussard would disagree with them on their points. I'm just saying that there are other people that have brought this information out. Why all of a sudden did NASA just cut it off? Washington Post ran an article in 1983 about this mystery planet. All of a sudden it went dark, and now it's starting to leak back out in the mainstream news. Could it be because we're getting closer to the arrival of Planet X, which I believe very strongly could bring about the sixth seal that you read about in Revelation chapter 6. This is Interstellar Realities Radio. Thank you for
the Chinese data. We decided we were looking to see if NASA knew about it or not. And so there was news reports all the way up to 1992 that prior to that there was publications that they sent the Pioneer and Voyager probe looking for this 10th planet, as they would call it, Planet X. And in the software models, whenever we turn the path that Voyager and Pioneer probes took to see if there was confirmation, well, we found out that they sent the probes in the same area of space, the same constellation. And it showed basically that their instruments on these satellites made instrument contact with this object in 1992. And that's when NASA went silent on it. And the following, that was December of 1992. Somewhere in the following year, Dr. Harrington published his paper on Planet X, on where he thought it was, and he died 2 to 3 months after his paper was published. Kind of mysterious on his death also. And so you can clearly see in the articles that was printed prior to 1992 that they were looking for this object. And the models tell us that they were aware of it. Now, they had 8 years before it would come within optical telescope sight, which was around year 2000. They had 8 years to figure out how to block it. And there's a picture of them building what's called a solar sail in the mid-1990s, but there's no record of them launching it. A solar sail deploys like an umbrella. It's attached to a satellite, and it opens up as large as half of a football field. Now, there's nothing strategic about this piece of equipment. So they built it, but they didn't make it public that they launched it. Either they launched it in secret, or it was never sent up. And if it was never sent up, then I find it strange that they built it. So, but this object would have been exactly what you would need to block our view from optical telescopes we see on Earth. And I personally believe that's why we can't see it today, because there's nothing that's confirmed today from what I've seen and from what I've actually looked with my own telescopes that gives us any verification of visual confirmation. I think once it gets close enough and the tail of this object is too large for them to be able to hide it using a satellite, then it'll become relevant for us to be able to see this. We will see a comet-like object.
Right.
And that'll be within, if this date in Revelation, March 26, 2016, is relevant, then I expect the last 9 months prior that it would be the comet tail would be too large for them to spot, somewhere around that range. We also have the prophecies of Jonah, where Yeshua said if you read further down, remember how he said, for a wicked generation, you'd only have the sign of Jonah? And he was at first referred to the whale. A little bit further down, there's an inkling that he mentioned Nineveh. Well, he was 3 days away from Nineveh as far as when the whale spit him back out. He had to travel 3 more days to better get to Nineveh. And remember the second part of his story, there's only 2 pages to his story. The second one was when Jonah was in Nineveh, and he says, in 40 days your doom comes. You should repent. Well, the model clearly shows us in 40 days you have a clear view of this from earth. And what's interesting is what's not being said during Jonah's time. He didn't commit one miracle. He walked into a town and said, repent. Yet the entire town did, including the king, with no miracles. Because the people of the town saw very strange signs. They probably saw fish dying in the river, earthquakes, severe drought, and numerous other signs that we see today. And so when Jonah pointed to the object, and they could clearly see it, because now it's coming out from behind the sun, in 40 days your doom has come. They took him serious, because just prior, like 358 years earlier, this event came around during the time of King David and Saul. The period there was a 7-year drought there, and so they probably through verbal as well as writings, they had it documented because it was not that long period of time, and so they knew exactly what Jonah was talking about. And so therefore, I believe the government of the world, will announce to the public that they have a problem only at 40 days. Will the general public hear it from the mouth of their local government?
Wow.
Government officials.
Brother Gil, that's just amazing. And again, I just kind of wait till you tail off there, so I jump in. I don't want to over-talk you. Because that's the model of Jonah. You think we'll have 40 days. Now, I want to get into what you think the world's going to look like. The cities, the country. When that 40 days happens, we know there's going to be pandemonium.
Right.
I wanted to share an article real quick, just based off your last point, if that's okay.
All right.
It's found on space.com. And one thing you were talking about is the disclosure of Planet X, when you think it'll happen. You think it'll be 40 days out. Well, when you go to space.com, that's a very credible website. It's not like a gullible.com or something like that. And I don't really know much about gullible.com. I just use that for an example. And I remember back in 2007, 2008, when I was researching things about Planet X, I mention Planet X to the church every now and then because, like you, I do believe that it has caused different events in the history of the world, and I do believe it will cause the sixth seal, which is why I think the topic is so very relevant to these times to talk about the sixth seal in Planet X, because now in the mainstream news, they're beginning to disclose tidbits of information about Planet X, a little bit here, a little bit there. And I remember back in 08 and 09, there was people, they were saying, hey, when we get close to this thing, you're going to start hearing them admit it slowly. Well, this started about a year ago. I started hearing, like on Fox News or CNN or whatnot, they was talking about Planet X. And my ears were perked up because I remembered they're starting to talk about this. And there was a time that NASA, they absolutely waylaid anyone. I mean, you can get on YouTube and search NASA scientist Planet X, and there's this guy on there, and he is just absolutely saying, don't worry about it, it's nothing, we would all know. But boy, how times have changed, because let me read you this headline from space.com. It says, Mysterious Planet X. This is from January the 16th, 2015. Space.com. Mysterious Planet X may really lurk undiscovered in our solar system. When you say something's undiscovered, you're saying a lot, I think, without saying a lot, is how one fellow put it. A Planet X might actually exist. This is what the article says. And so might Planet Y. At least 2 planets larger than Earth likely lurk in the dark depths of space, far beyond Pluto, just waiting to be discovered, a new analysis of the orbits of extreme trans-Neptunian objects, or the etnons, suggests. So they found these etnos. Researchers studied 13, it says right here, frigid bodies such as the dwarf planet Sedna that cruise around the sun at great distances in the elliptical paths. The article goes on to say that these bodies they found out past Neptune, again called etnos. This is from space.com, January of 2015. The actual article is January the 16th, so if you want to see it, it's by Mike Wall, space.com, senior writer. These etnos were being disturbed, and it caught the eyes of these scientists, and they say the reason is because these planets are out there, Planet X, maybe Planet Y. And it goes on to talk about some different things concerning these planets. And I'm going to tell you something. If my suspicion's correct, you're going to continually hear more and more of these kind of articles coming out in the mainstream until they finally say, hey, we found it, even though a lot of people believe they've always known that it's there. What do you think, Brother Gil?
Oh, without a doubt, they're going to condition the public to where they slowly adapt to the idea, to where there's not a panic. But when it comes to 40 days, shortly after that, there'll be a panic because it's steadily increasing in size as it's approaching us. And I don't know how else to put this, but it's going to be a frightening. If you don't know the science well enough on what to expect during the passing of this next event, it's going to be very, very serious to a person. Remember, I was telling you that not to look at September. Well, it's the same reason for Jonah, the 40-day warning. You can't have a 40-day warning if you're expecting it in September. You can only have a 40-day warning if you're expecting it in March. Got it? For CO6. It has to pass close to Earth to give us the circumstances listed in CO6. The people are mixing 2 events as one. What I've learned through this research, which I was not aware of before, but it can prove out in math. Remember how the 2 witnesses prophesied for 1,260 days? Then they're dead for 3.5?
Yes, 3.5. It's 3.5 years, isn't it?
No, they're dead for 3.5 days.
3.5 days.
They prophesied for 3.5 years, but they're dead for 3.5 days.
Right.
Okay. Now the word prophesied means to profess, to speak. They cannot speak if they're dead. So how many days are there on earth from the time of the day of the resurrection and rapture to the time they show up on earth? You got to add 3.5 days to that 1,260 days to find out when did they start. All right? So there's a 3.5 day difference in what most people put on their charts. Now, how many days are the people who are in hiding? The remnant that goes into hiding. It says they're only in hiding 1,260 days. Then they're raptured. So if you were to draw a single date, pick a random date, and put the 2 prophets being dead for 3.5, and then they're resurrected, and then the living who are in hiding raptured, remember it said the dead are first, then the living. And you draw these scales backwards in time, you find out that the two prophets are on earth before the remnant goes into hiding by 3.5 days. People didn't do the math correctly, you see? Well, guess what? If you take this March 26th that's given in Revelation 12:1 and plotted out go 3.5 days earlier from that point, you get a full moon. Full moon is the Feast of Passover. And what are the Hebrews practicing? Which is called a mikra, a rehearsal. They rehearse at Feast of Passover. They set an empty plate and a chair for Elijah. They make a crack at the door to allow him in, and they wait each Feast of Passover as they practice for him to show up and have a meal with them, which is the Feast of Passover, announcing the groom is coming. 3.5 days later is when the groom comes, which is also the day of this meteor shower on the opposite side of Earth. And he takes you to a place of hiding for 1,260 days. And he says it's a remnant. Remnant, and as well as the 5 wise virgins. The 5 wise, or maidens is the proper way in Hebrew. Those 5 wise maidens are the bridesmaids because they have the lamps. In the customs of the Hebrew wedding, there was no street lights, and the groom would come in the mid of night to pick up his wife. But before he'd go pick it up, he'd have a messenger sent to announce to the father-in-law, say, don't attack me. I'm coming like a thief in the night, but don't attack me. I'm just coming to pick up my bride. It was a custom that was taught to them. And the bridesmaids would be waiting with the bride, and they had their lamps of oil to light the way throughout the town as they're walking with the bride and the bridegroom. And she was brought to her chamber prior to the wedding. Well, in this one, that chamber will be only for 3.5 years. Then it's a rapture and a resurrection. And we've mixed the two up because we didn't follow a Hebrew wedding. We're following more like a Western wedding. Hebrew weddings are much more drawn out and acted out in a way. And that's why the parable of the 10 virgins, now, when he comes, now the resurrection and the rapture, that's on the 7th month of September. Because there's a Hebrewism for that feast day, which is called what is it? The last great day or something like it's called, that feast day. Well, in Hebrew, it means no man knows the day or the hour, because that one is at the first of the month. It's the only feast at the first of the month, and you don't know that until you spot the first sliver of the moon. Remember what Yeshua said. I don't need to tell you because you already know. And he explains to them, because the day of it is the day of no man knows the day or the hour. They knew exactly what he was talking about, because that's what that festival was called, which is in September. But that's the resurrection and the rapture. What I'm talking about in March 26th is prior, 3.5 years earlier, where a remnant, as well as the bridesmaid, which there's no number to them, they go into a place of safety, to where they're not harmed during the Great Tribulation, but they're on earth, because it says wilderness. Wilderness has never been referred to as heaven unless you wish to twist Scripture. Wilderness means wilderness. And they're on earth because they're going to experience the earth shaking, earth tilting, the electrical discharges between the planets when they come close, the aurora, the northern lights going all the way down to the equator, the high winds, but they won't be harmed. But they'll experience the mightiness of the Father doing what he's doing to them without a hair harmed on them. They cannot experience the mightiness of the Father if they're off earth. And we're missing this because we're not studying the Hebrew customs. And that's part of the puzzle that I've learned in all of the books of the Bible are not random. They're data points pointing to the last book of the Bible, giving us the data on what to expect and how to figure it out. Even gives you the 40-day warning of Jonah. It gives you everything you need. But you got to understand the entire Bible on the biblical science level. Remember, he says, my people die of lack of knowledge. You got to fulfill that blank with knowledge to better survive this. What to expect and the timing and the whole nine. He's telling us exactly when. That's why I'm very concerned about that day. I can't tell the future. But when he puts a date written in there that missed everybody's viewpoint for 2,000 years, then he opens our eyes right at the end right here. Yeah, I'm very concerned about that date of being a real event.
Brother Gil, as you've been talking, I've been trying to trek with you and look at some things online at the same time, because as you know, you hear this, you hear that, you want to see what different articles may be out there, what's trending. One thing that I'm thinking right now, Brother Gil, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, is if the governments of the world come out and they say, hey, you got 40 minutes, 40 days, in this planet, because they can't hide it anymore, and this planet's going to come and really start causing chaos on Earth. What do you think will happen in society during those 40 days when they make this announcement?
Well, that's not very much, because they're going to have control over the people by and if you follow the seals, the order that the seals are given, because they're numbered. This is one of the few books that are actually numbered. And I would say that the Almighty, knows his numbering system. If he gives us 1, 2, 3, it doesn't mean 4 comes before 3. If he numbered it, it means that that's exactly the order that is going to be fulfilled. And if we remember how we've been clearly taught that you use the Old Testament to interpret the New, and the New is confirmed in the Old, and so on and so on? Sure. You got to turn to the Old Testament to understand the 7 seals, because there's an overlay that's taking a shadow picture. All of the rabbis, no matter what group they are, there's different groups, they have certain books that we don't have access to, especially one called the Book of Genealogy. Goes all the way from Adam to now. They know what year it is. They publicly proclaimed at the Wailing Wall that on March of 2001 was the beginning of Jacob's trouble, and it was also the beginning of 6001.
Now talk about that, Brother Gil. Let's hone in right there. So the Jewish rabbis believed. Now, are you talking about Messianic rabbis, or are you talking about Orthodox Jewish rabbis? Because I know that they don't look at the New Testament the same way we do.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Karaite Jews that don't believe in man-made changes. I'm talking about the Orthodox. There's several groups of Judaism. They have the same problem as Christianity. They got splintered groups. Came together and agreed, because there's one common book of genealogy that they can count with. They said March 29th, 2001 was actually 6001, which was the beginning of the millennium and the beginning of Jacob's trouble. Now, they come out and said that in March. But September 11th, right, September 11th of 2001, we were attacked by Islam. Okay? That basically declared a jihad against Jews and Christians, which in my interpretation is Jacob. Okay? If you look up Jacob, what took place to him? If you want to know what Jacob's trouble is, go read Jacob, the book, the story of Jacob, and you find that. Remember how when he went work for a relative, he had to work 7 years to get his first bride. But his bride, he was tricked. He didn't know anything about her, and he was tricked into this marriage.
Sure.
Well, 6001 was a Sabbath year. That's the end of a count of a seventh. That's the seventh year. Well, you got to. So a contract doesn't start until the next year. So 6000 year 2002 in March, you start counting. You count the next 7 years. And guess what? In 2008, we had a president that was elected that we knew nothing about, that some people called him a Messiah.
Sure.
Kind of like a marriage that we didn't know anything about, if you want to call it that. Now, if we go 7 more years later, that puts it this 2015 is a Shemitah, is a 7th year. The following year is a Jubilee year. 2016 is a Jubilee year starting in March. It is the custom of the Hebrews that the Messiah will return on a beginning of a Jubilee. It is stated in the text that when Israel was reformed, that generation that saw Israel formed would not die out,
right,
till all is fulfilled. Well, if you take a look in let me see, in Psalms, Psalm says that generation is 70 or 80. Well, if you take into account a bar mitzvah at age 12, when they're accountable for, they're able to give testimony to what they see at age 12. Well, in 1947, it was declared on paper. 1948 was when it was an actual nation. You take 1947 and add 12 to it, and look at this. For the Jubilee, they're roughly 82 years old. And then if you count straight numbers without age 12, you're looking at 70, exactly 70 years. We cannot go to the next Jubilee. This generation will be dead.
Now, Steve,
if you remember earlier that I mentioned about the Nibiru disc, how it gave us the exact date, year, and month of Joseph when this incident happened?
That is very, very interesting to me. When you said we cannot go to the next Jubilee, can you key in on that just for a second?
Yes, because it is prophecy given to us by Yeshua. It says, it's in the gospel, it says, this generation will not die out until all is fulfilled. That is the Holocaust generation. They will not die out. That generation will not die out, but all is fulfilled. We cannot go to another Jubilee because the Messiah has to return on the beginning of a Jubilee, which will be Passover, around the Feast of Passover. Remember, Elijah announces he's coming. 3.5 days later, he comes, mid of night. And that night will be 12 hours longer. That's why the wise versions have 2 portions of oil. The foolish have one portion. The wise have two portions. Because that night will be 12 hours longer. Because a portion of all is supposed to last the entire night, which is normally 12. And the groom comes in mid of night, not midnight, mid of night. And that night's going to be 24 hours. He comes exactly after the first 12 hours are finished. Well, the foolish versions run out of oil. They got to go back to town to buy. The wise are trimming their wick and refilling their lamps. And you read the text, that's when he comes. And only the wise make it to the place of safety. We're fixing to have an open book test, and many will fail because they do not understand how the entire Bible fits together. Gives you all the information of the knowledge you need to make it to the place of safety. For 3.5 years, you'll be in that place of safety. Then the resurrection and the rapture, which will be on the 7th month. Okay? And I'm hoping that this makes sense to you, what I'm pointing out. Because mathematically, they could not have guessed that date 2,000 years ago. It's impossible. You need a decimal places of between 4 to 6 zeros. You know?
No, it's absolutely interesting, and it's stuff that you can listen to. Like I say, I've listened to a lot of different interviews. One that I've listened to from frontwards to the end, probably I don't know how many different times, but I've been in and out of the interviews with Brother Augusto Perez, Brother Augusto Perez is supposed to be coming on to this show in March. I got to set a date up with him. But I like to hear you explain your theory on this and things that I can't maybe take in right now. I can just go back and listen to, because you can archive this, MP3 it. We're going to upload this to YouTube. We've got a few shows set to get uploaded to YouTube, and this is going to be one of them. And I appreciate you taking the time to explain these things, because you have put a huge amount of research into the Planet X subject. I can't take it all in one setting, but I go back over it, listen to it some more, and then read Revelation, and then, of course, think about what you say and how it fits in the Revelation. And that's just how researchers do things.
You see, what's interesting, the Hebrews count the male as the unit of a family. Remember the 144,000, the bride? They're from the tribe of Israel. It states what tribe they are from. But that's counting only the males. If you add another 3.5, counting the wives and the children, if they have a righteous wife and children, they're there also. That gives you roughly 500,000 people representing the bride. The bridemaid, there's a number given. I don't think that number is random. It says 5 wives. I think that number is 5 times the bride. You're looking at 2.5 to 3 million people total. That happens. Now, the bride is from any tribe, anywhere. I mean, the bridemaid is not specific to the tribe of Israel. It is anyone can be the bridemaid. That is roughly 2.5 to 3 million people. That is about the same number as the exodus of Egypt. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Well.
Hello.
Yes. Yes, we're here. Brother Gil, we're almost down to 20 minutes on the show tonight, and we'll have realistically about 15 minutes. I think it's been very informative. We really stayed on the topic tonight, really, for the most part, from beginning to end. And I missed some things through the show that I'm going to probably have to go back and listen to again, just to digest everything. We do these shows sometimes. I'm sitting at my house around the kitchen table sometimes, or the living room table. Sometimes I'm back in my office that my wife and I share, and other times I may be in one of my little girls' rooms. I was on the radio the other day, and I was in one of my little girls' rooms with the computer up on the bed, and I was tucked in the corner, and they were out in the other room. So we do these shows from my house. We are not in a big, giant studio, although as we build this new addition onto the church, we are going to have the opportunity probably to build a little studio to do a lot more than just blog talk radio interviews. So we're looking forward to that. I'm just saying that to say that when you're talking sometimes, you probably heard the dog bark once tonight, and you might hear that I'm trying to fight staying attentive sometimes. And I've caught most, if not all, of the content and the things that I need to go back and listen to again. I'll try to do that to clear up some of the points that I kind of get lost on. But all in all, I feel we've stayed on point, and we've got through the subject of Planet X comprehensively tonight. As we got about 10 more minutes here of airtime until we got to close the show down and give people a chance to accept Christ, we see the world right now in chaos. Brother Gil, we see thousands and thousands of bodies of fish, carcasses washing up on the shores. It seems the ocean floor is breaking apart, and perhaps the fumes of the gases in the centers of the earth are coming up to the ocean floors. That could be one possible theory. I think that's the case. We see sinkholes everywhere. I can't remember ever when I was a kid, ever growing up, even in my teenage years, in my 20s, ever seeing sinkholes the way we're seeing them now. We are seeing, from what I hear, a barrage of asteroids and meteor activity coming down through our atmosphere, creating these tremendous fireballs that are just astounding people as they come crashing down into the skies with these big flashes of light. There have been a lot of people see UFOs. There's alien abduction accounts, which we know are fallen angels, demon spirits, things like that. The nations of the world are at war almost everywhere you look. Maybe not every nation, but sometimes it seems like it. I mean, you see them fighting in the Middle East. They're doing brutal things, horrific things that I can't even imagine sometimes that we're seeing them, but yet we are. It's ghastly, to say the least, the torture that they're putting Christians through. You got Russia and the situation in Europe, and America and Russia's now at a standoff, it seems like, and it's almost like who's going to flinch. And I think Putin is a man that is from the old Soviet Union mentality. His ties and his roots into that philosophy run very deep, and I wouldn't put nothing past him. There's 4 men of God I've heard: Dimitri Duduman, David Wilkerson, A. Allen, Henry Groover, and I'm pretty sure it's all these 4 have had visions of Russia attacking America. Now we're seeing that come to a climax. All these things are bottlenecking right now, and we could even talk about more: the moral breakdown, the same-sex marriages, all the things. We could just go on and on. All these things are coming to a head right now in real time. Brother Gil, if you had to leave our listening audience with just some final thoughts to close this show tonight, based off everything we've talked about, all the things I just said, trying to paint the picture of our world, what would those thoughts be right now?
Well, I'd focus on the time coming here more than what we're seeing on the news, because it's more important for us to focus on getting this information we need to make it to Jerusalem for this rehearsal. The word Mekrah, which is often taught in Christianity as feast, that is not the definition of that word. It means rehearsal. Remember how the Hebrews had to go to Jerusalem each year for Passover? That's why there were so many there for the Passover when Yeshua was being sacrificed. Because they were doing a Mekrah, they were able to recognize that he was the Messiah. Okay? There was a group that recognized it because they were fulfilling the Mekrah and what he did. Well, he said you will practice these precepts forever. These Mekrahs, where you understand the meaning. There is a Mekrah coming up for the Feast of Passover where you're required to be in Jerusalem. It says over 12 times in the Bible that the bride and the bridesmaids are going to be picked up on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. That's where the meeting place is. Don't forsake the rehearsals that he's telling us to keep forever.
Brother Gil,
otherwise you will miss the
people.
appointed time. You see?
Brother Gil, you are one of the first people that I have ever heard, talk about the significance of the believers going to Jerusalem when these events begin to take place. I don't know if I've ever heard that before. It's so interesting to me.
It comes by learning. That's why he gave the Mekrah, the rehearsals, so they would recognize him when he came in the place of the Lamb. They were all required to go to Jerusalem. Okay? There's only going to be, that's why he says there's only a remnant that's going to be following his precepts that he said follow forever.
So you're saying essentially, if you don't go to Jerusalem when you see these things start to happen, that you're going to miss the rapture?
No, this is not a rapture. You're going to miss the taking away into the wilderness. Rapture refers off the earth. That's not what it says.
Got you. This is
Don't overlook the word wilderness. That's a key emphasis.
And of course, you're talking about in the book of Revelation where it talks about the dragon, I believe, spews out a flood, and the earth opens up and swallows the flood to protect those people that are in the wilderness.
Exactly. This is our sign. When we see this sign, when you see in December, when you have Hanukkah, you look up in the heavens, you see a lineup taking place. This comet-like object is going to be on the ecliptic right outside of Sagittarius. Above it is called Job's coffin. It's like a fist with a finger pointing. It's going to be pointing to this object, and it's going to be making a dance underneath the thing 3 times. It's going to pass underneath. Each time it passes underneath there, it's a week that pertains to the feast of the Hebrews. The last feast that it circles underneath this is Hanukkah, Feast of Lights. Well, the planets, when they're moving around in ancient Hebrew, they were called Feast of Lights. That's your signal. When you see that, you order your ticket to be there in Jerusalem around January, because.
So you're saying let's go over it again. I need to stay off this computer. I was just on our chat line, and I was asking them on our chat line while you were talking if there were any questions. I know we have only a few minutes, but now when you're saying when I see the lights, when I see the sign of the planet X in the sky, that's what you're saying. That's the trigger point.
Under Job's coffin, which is the modern name for that is Delphinius, but it's like a hand with a finger pointing. When you see it underneath, that's your sign. This object is real. Be in Jerusalem for around January, because we can count. Remember, it says if you make it through the 1,390 days, count yourself lucky. Well, we can count where
Daniel when it talks about the 2 different sets of days, right? If you make it to that last set,
we can count on a calendar today, 1,260 days from this date, and say that's the day of resurrection. But guess what? After the second cataclysm that happens 150 days later, Earth's days are changed to 364 days, I believe. No, 360. Yeah, 364. As it was in Enoch. I think it was Enoch. Wasn't it him? Yeah, the book of Enoch, he gives a calendar year of 364 days, I believe it is. That has never happened in the history of our earth, but it's fixing to. Therefore, we'll lose count, and we won't know the day or the hour. But today, we can count it on the calendar. So if you count backwards 1,390 days, you end up where, what? That's the peace agreement, around January 11th, where it's a forced covenant with Israel. It was forced to move the 450,000 Jews on the West Bank to this side. Well, if you get there before that peace agreement or that forced covenant, get you an apartment, because there's going to be a shortage of them. There's going to be a shortage of them. And
wow,
yeah,
Brother Gil, that's so intense. What you're saying is I mean, it's new for me, and it gives me something to really think about. And you really, and I believe we're there at these end times. I mean, we definitely agree on that. I believe Planet X is out there. I totally believe it is going to be used to bring about the sixth seal. Could it be wrong? Sure, but that's my persuasion based off the research and the data, as you like to say, that I've processed. And you're saying that there was going to be a certain point where physically, believers need to get going to Jerusalem. What a thought.
We are not ignorant. Yeah, we are not ignorant of his return if we're following his mikraz and his signs in heaven. They're going to be declared. I think the
Bible's clear that he doesn't want us to be in the dark, and he doesn't want us to he's not going to come up on us as a thief in the night, the believers, his believers, the ones that's watching, the one that knows what the Scriptures say.
Right. It's a custom to act like you don't know, but you really do. Mid of week, mid of night. 3.5 days after the Feast of Passover. It's going to be March 26, 2016. Revelation 12:1.
So you think 2016 is a date? I will tell you something, Brother Gil, and this is something I've never shared. I might have shared it once or twice. I'm almost certain I've never shared it on the radio ever. About 3 weeks ago, I had two dreams, two dreams. I might have told you about these dreams in a private phone call. The first dream, I was with one of my oldest friends that I've ever had, as far as length of our friendship. And we were in my house, and we walked out of my front door, and it was dark. And whenever it's dark in a dream, it's kind of eerie for me. And I looked up at the moon, and to make a long story short, the moon was hit with a giant asteroid in my dream. And I told my friend, I said, this is it. I could see the dust rising from the moon in my dream. And I said, I believe I said, that's the dust from the moon. I said, the moon was just struck. And in my dream, I got my dad on the phone. And I said, Dad, we don't even have enough time to prepare. I said, we don't even have enough time to prepare. We got to meet now. And I don't know where we were going, but we were definitely going somewhere because we knew things were going to get very chaotic. So I saw that in my dream, and I almost heard the percussion of it, like a poof in my dream. It seems like I almost heard it, but I saw the dust rising off the moon in my dream. You could see it from Earth, and before it happened, though, and this is the part of the dream I don't quite really understand, before the asteroid hit the moon and a star were like dancing in the sky. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but they were dancing. That's how I explained it to my dad. I've told a couple people personally this dream. I don't think I've ever shared it publicly. I think I did it at church, this dream here, the first dream. Now, the second dream, I'm not sure if I have. This was like on a Saturday night. The moon and the star started to dance, and the moon actually kind of looked like a star, then turned into the moon. They were rotating around each other when the asteroid hit the moon and the dust flew off. And then the moon was still shining at the end of my dream, but it was very, very dim. It was still shining, but it had lost so much of its light. Now, I knew that, I really felt that dream was probably spiritual, and I don't spiritualize every dream, but I saw it so clear in my dream, it so startled me. The very next night, I had a dream that I was back in the old place that my wife and I used to live, this trailer, and I was in our bedroom, and my brother-in-law was there, and I was laying out all this research from the old-time reformers. I remember specifically maybe like Jonathan Edwards or George Whitefield, some of the old preachers from the Great Awakening. And a long story short, in that dream, I was trying to tell my brother-in-law that all these things these guys were talking about was all happening in 2016. I actually had that dream a few weeks ago. And that's when you say 2016, I think about that dream when I was, because those men actually pointed to the years of 2012 to 2016, some of them, when you ran their numbers and their thoughts about the empires and the things that we have seen in the history of the world. So we are in the season. We are in the season. Brother Gil, we got about 5 minutes. Anything you just like to just close with real quick, because we still need 2 minutes to say the sinner's prayer.
Well, just to qualify that, remember that Nibiru disk I was telling you about Joseph. If you calculate it back to whenever they entered the land, that gives you 1485 BCE. That's exactly 70 jubilees to this coming jubilee coming in 2016. Exactly. Wow. 70. That fulfills part of Daniel again. We have more math than we've seen in a long time on the lineups.
I think so. I think so. Well, Brother Gil, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, and maybe we can do it again if you wish.